Welcome back to another episode of the Beyond the Blueprint podcast, powered by Lapolis Electric, and I'm your host, Stephen Marcelino, and I'm here today with Brian Matthews. Brian, thank you for coming on to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Brian is a project manager with Green Street Power Partners, and they are a solar solutions company. And again, thank you for joining us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do for Green Street Power Partners and what Green Street Power Partners does on a larger scale?
Sure. So I am one of the project managers over at Green Street, located in Stamford, Connecticut. Green Street is a solar owner, operator, and developer. So we work nationwide currently at the moment. We are looking at some overseas projects, they're early stage development, but right now it is mostly all just nationwide, East Coast, West Coast. And, my day-to-day role is more on the construction side. So I oversee a lot of the contractors we hire. So what we hire were called EPCs, companies that do all of our engineering, procurement, and construction.
Nice.
So my day-to-days are overseeing their progress, making site visits, keeping on schedule, more or less it's intertwined with our interdepartmental management.
Very nice. So your company, from a high level, I'm sure you guys do many more things, but you're at the crux of it like a developer for solar projects.
Yeah.
So you're bringing on subs and different contractors to bring, your company's vision to life, more or less.
Correct.
Very nice. So tell me a little bit about, what's your day like? What is your day to day? Are you going to the sites? Are you handling blueprints on the computer? What does your day to day look like?
Kind of all of the above. I handle anything from, anywhere 10 to 20 projects, in a clip. And,
wow.
There's site visits required. A lot of what we do now is technologically advanced, so I can look at progress reports, based on what these contractors are doing through photos. We use a great tool called Procore. Procore pretty much allows me to see daily progress reports as they're uploaded, via photos. And, a lot of emails, a lot of conference calls. Dealing with the utility companies is a big part, of what I do. And, it's just managing their expectations and keeping everything kind of on schedule, forecasting payments, upcoming payments, all things of that nature.
So you handle, under that project manager role, you're handling a lot of tasks for your company and making sure that these projects are successfully completed. What is the key, tool that you utilize aside from the technology, interpersonal tool to make sure that you're on task and on target? Is it organization? Is it, following up constantly? What are you doing to make sure that, because 10 to 20 projects at a time, that's nothing to shy away from. That takes a very specific person to be able to handle that magnitude of work. That's not like you're handling, one project and moving on to the next, and you could keep everything nice and put a ribbon on everything as you complete it. You probably have an extremely detailed process to complete these jobs.
Yeah. So definitely speak a little bit on that. A lot of it comes down to organization. Things definitely can get away from you very quickly if you're not constantly organized. My company, we use a plethora of, good little organizational tools, different softwares. It's a lot of follow-up calls, a lot of emails, a lot of, task requests. We built out an internal company portal, which allows you to assign tasks not only to other people, but to yourself.
Very nice.
If you try to keep everything in your head, things get lost.
They do.
Right? Yeah, so it's definitely a lot of, just follow-up meetings with different departments, and a lot of just task requests that you've assigned for yourself. And you set due dates, reminders, that I think is essential for me, make sure I don't slip on tasks.
And that's extremely important. For myself, we use a lot of the different tools as well, like HubSpot, different CRMs. And I live and die by like my Outlook calendar. If I don't have something on Outlook, And it's not a slight on anybody, but I'm not gonna remember 9 times out of 10 that I need to be somewhere. And that's just because I have so many different things going on a day to day basis. I schedule everything sometimes down to when I could go make myself a cup of coffee. Just because I like to make most use of my time to make sure that projects are getting done, in a timely manner, that clients are receiving proposals when they're supposed to receive proposals, that site visits are happening when they should be happening, and just using those organizational tools. They're there to help us. They're not there to, make our job harder. In this day and age, with the digital era especially, instant gratification is like almost a problem in all industries, not just our industry. The fact that information can travel like that, relatively at like the speed of light, depending on how good your data connectivity is, it makes our job as leaders to be on top of our game and make sure things are getting done on task and on time. Let me ask you, 10 to 20 projects, that's a large scale of jobs. What is what project are you most proud of, or what is your biggest project that you completed? Tell us a little bit about that.
I think the largest project that I have completed was actually not with Green Street. It was with one of my old companies. It was a 7.5 megawatt dual racking facility. So it actually was done up in Sydney, New York. It was done for a company called Amphenol. Amphenol is a industry-leading aerospace manufacturer. They
Wow.
make all kinds of parts for airplanes, aviation, everything up to the solar industry. So they actually themselves make module connectors for solar panels.
Wow.
So it was actually kind of cool to be able to do solar for their facility. They ended up knocking down their old facility due to over flooding over times, and
Wow.
they ended up moving up the street. It's about 23 acres of land. There was a giant concrete slab that was left behind. There was grassed area, so with that, definitely became a little bit of a complex install because of the different types of rackings you needed to use. One for the concrete, one for the ground, and at what points did they interchange? That was up somewhere up north of 18,000 solar panels.
Wow.
For that
It's very
project.
big.
Yeah, that is, and it's one of the largest commercial corporate solar projects in New York State.
Wow. That's very impressive. And you were at the helm of that project.
I was.
Leading it?
I was actually at the co-helm. It was a very large and complex project, so there was two project managers working, and I was one of them.
Wow, that's awesome, and congratulations for completing a project successfully of that magnitude. That's definitely a nice accolade to be able to wear on your chest.
Absolutely.
And as you know too, Lapolis dives into the solar division as well of the whole energy efficiency and sustainability world, and just I'm not directly involved with our solar division, but I have great relationships with some of the guys that run it, like Rob Doria in our company, who you may have spoke with about potentially working and doing some opportunities on the solar side with. But he's the best when it comes to this stuff. And we did a project in upstate New York as well on the solar side. And to get to the point of even being able to install solar, we had to build access roads and the whole civil and structural engineering side of these projects is immense. It's not just stick solar panels in the ground and everybody's getting electricity from the sun. The leaps and the bounds that need to be jumped through to complete these projects. Especially when we self-perform. Because I know our team that was on this project. I can't speak on the physical size of the project, but I do know that we had transportation vehicles to get from one side of the job to the other.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely 10, 12 plus acres of land that we were covering, on solar development, and we were getting across the fields with a gator, vehicle, and it was an immense project, and we were a general contractor. We were the electrician. We brought in steel guys, road work crews, and it was an immense job. And I'm sure, through your own experience of dealing with these projects, especially upstate in these large fields, tell us a little bit about that. What's it like overseeing these contractors? Are they self-performing the projects completely like Lapolis is able to, or are you handling multiple subs?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. And when we hire our EPCs, we are looking for them for a turnkey service, self-perform all the construction process. But just to back up a little bit, what the self-perform EPCs don't see is all the back work and legwork that goes into getting those sites ready for that civil work, for that construction. There is so much diligence behind all that.
Yep.
We have a huge department at Green Street just on diligence and underwriting. Are there legalities involved? Are there easements? How is the drainage of the site, right? We have to do a SWIP plan. We have to, mitigate all stormwater. Are there tree clearings? And are there any invasive species, nesting periods where, if it's a wooded area or if there's parcels of the land that are still forested, we have to have companies come in and actually do a tree count. They will go and they will count each individual tree and measure the base
Yep.
of it. Identify the species of it. Are there bats nesting in those trees? And there's certain times a year we can't cut those down. There really is a lot. There's, the geotechs, what's underground. That's a big thing when it comes to ground mounted solar is top of the land might look great and flat, but what's underneath, right? How deep is the bedrock? Are our posts going to actually make it to the depth of requirement? Past pull test reports. So all that stuff is done prior to even bidding out some of these projects. This way, at least it's known. So when we bid off a project, the contractors then know, like, this is what we're getting ourselves into. This is what's going to be required. They can give us, a more accurate pricing, less change orders,
Yep.
and then they do. They come in and they self-perform. We're working pretty diligently now to make sure that our subcontractors aren't subcontracting out 3 or 4 times over, right? We want tier 1 subcontractors to be working on our sites.
Yep.
We need them to be held accountable, and so far it's been working well. But the civil is definitely an undertaking a lot of companies aren't familiar with,
Yep.
right? But as solar becomes larger and larger, and more land is now optimal for solar, it's a big undertaking, but it's definitely something that a lot of the contractors are starting to bring in-house.
Yeah, there's definitely a major boom on the solar, the same way there was with like the EV car charging and the LED retrofits when that became big. It's just kind of that progression to become more energy efficient and sustainable as I guess, as the human race, so to speak, and to try and clean things up. At least that's what they say. And when you drive down 287, you see the solar panels on top of the, what is that, the ice hockey rink,
Nice
right?
rink, yep.
The ice rink, which, I'm going to have to give another shout out to Lapolis. We did complete that project. And as you drive past, some of these bigger corporate facilities, off to the side on like 684, you see a lot of these solar panels that are kind of just like popping up on top of the garages or in their field spaces that they have, behind their office buildings. And, it's pretty amazing. Everything kind of just like popped up, the same way like Hudson Yards did in New York City, out of nowhere. That was just like, barren land. And now there's skyscrapers all over the place as you drive down the West Side Highway. And, it's definitely the future. And like anything new, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of kinks that have to be worked out in terms of the way things are engineered, or how can, these panels hold a longer charge, or, just, standard, product development, situations. Now, let me ask you, in terms of like, now the sites have been developed, solar panels are in. What are companies like yourselves, or are there companies out there testing these solar panels from like a preventative maintenance standpoint to make sure that throughout time, the longevity of the panels are staying strong?
Yeah. So Green Street actually, in ourselves, we are an asset owner.
Okay.
Right. So not only do we develop our own projects, but we will acquire already built assets. We have a whole department that is just based on overseeing these projects and monitoring them for the close to about 25 years.
Wow.
So our asset management department, they're all over that. In our builds, in order to meet certain milestones, certain testings have to be completed. Right?
Gotcha.
And that's all, I guess, intertwined with preventative maintenance. Right? They have to all Megger testing has to be done, voltage, IMPPs, VOCs.
Trip
Some of those-
testing of circuit breakers.
Trip
and things of
testing,
that
circuit
nature.
breakers, relay tests, everything has to be done either on the solar side and with the utilities conjunction.
Wow.
Right? In order for the utility to even give you permission to operate, which is in the industry we call PTO,
Yep.
that's the big milestone. That allows us to turn our system on and let it run.
Gotcha.
In order for that to happen, all this test has to be done. Right?
Gotcha.
These have to be done, and they have to be done in conjunction with the utility, done by what's called a witness test. And the
Yep.
witness test, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, if you do it in your side of the industry, but utility will need you to fire on the system, shut it off, make sure that everything turns on, fires off,
Yep.
properly, and within the required time frames.
Definitely.
In solar, you have when you flip a switch onto a solar system, the solar is not supposed to turn on for 5 minutes. At least, components will be activated, but no actual power should be flowing through for 5 minutes. But now with the new NEC codes, there's rapid shutdown requirements, meaning within fractions of a second, when you flip that switch off, there is zero power going
Zero
back to the
power.
grid. Correct.
Very interesting. Yeah, and that's like pretty similar on like the larger commercial projects we do. It's like commissioning. You have a commissioning agent come in and kind of observe the testing, observe the the overall turning on of the system, making sure everything's properly operating. So when the project does turn over to the building owner, everybody knows it's operating and it's safe. And it's very interesting. And in a lot of situations, we've been on both sides of it, because as you know, I'm involved with our testing and preventative maintenance division at Lapolis, where we actually design the scope of work to either test the system or we follow the testing spec that's provided to us. So we've tested a bunch of solar, applications outside of Lapolis. We've been called in as a third-party agency to test the integrity of the wire, to make sure the overcurrent protected devices are properly installed and set up for the trip settings and all those different types of applications. And that's really why I asked, to see where it's going in that regard, because if it's great to have everything installed and it all looks nice, but if it's not properly operating, then we all have bigger problems on our hands. So let me ask you, especially with the project you mentioned before, the very large 23 megawatt install, how important is the team aspect to you when handling these projects and working as a team and relying on each other to make sure that everyone's functions are properly carried out?
It's imperative. I mean, projects wouldn't get built if it weren't, being built from a team perspective, right? There's a lot involved. There are different departments that specialized in, in their day-to-days, right? Like, you don't just walk onto a site, put posts where you want and, throw some solar modules up and say, hey, we're ready to turn this thing on now, right? Like there's finances behind it. There's underwriting. Like I said, there's a lot of legal reviews.
Yep.
So a lot of my job is also communicating with the other departments, right? Making sure that the other departments are aware of where we stand in the course of construction, what they're going to need, forecasting, what documents, what information that they're going to need, in order to get ahead of where we are in construction. A smooth flowing process. And it's not easy. It's definitely not an easy thing to accomplish, right? Because, there might be a third party out there, working with our capital markets team, on a lending basis or a tax equity basis, that might be holding up our process. And, we need to find ways to mitigate that, so by talking with other departments. And, I like to think of myself as a pretty knowledgeable and smart guy, but, I'm humble enough to say I don't know it all,
No.
And I'm also the type that when there's things out there, like I like to obtain knowledge, right? I like to know how every machine works, and us as a company, we're a machine, we have to keep that machine well oiled, so there's always process improvements. There's always ways to look back and, lessons learned, things like that, things that we do on a quarterly basis, to make sure that the team effort is first and foremost in getting these projects built.
Yeah, it's very important. And you said another interesting thing too that I'm going to kind of throw at you. How important, like when you're dealing with multiple subcontractors or just dealing with multiple divisions of your own company, everybody's handling a different function from taxes to financing to actually building the job on a project management level. How important is communication? Aside from the teamwork aspect, because teamwork and communication go hand in hand. If somebody's not communicating, that starts the domino effect of a project that could potentially fail. So, one, how important is communication? And if communication starts getting off track, what do you guys do to make sure that it kind of comes back to where it needs to be?
Yeah, communication is key, and obviously not just in this industry. It's everywhere, right? And like you said, there's a lot of moving parts. It is very difficult to maintain an open line of communication with every department, every internal and external company that we deal with, right?
Yep.
And they get off track sometimes. For me personally, how I do this is my favorite opening line in an email, if I haven't heard from you in a while, is just following up, right? And I use that very often, and I'm very good with trying to keep that open line of communication. Again, internally, we use programs, we use softwares, we use task assignments, things that can actually remind them without you personally having to remind them, right? The software itself sends them task reminders. When it comes to dealing with third parties and contractors, it's as soon as we start a project, it's a mandatory weekly call for the internal departments involved, the head of those internal departments, and the contractors themselves. Weekly reports, updates, and these are all things that are required in our contracts with the third parties, the outside contractors.
Yep.
And in order to make certain milestones, if those contractors want to get paid, these things have to be met. It's normally not an issue that we deal with on the outside with the third parties. Internally, it's less of an issue. Our team works pretty well together. We've improved a lot of processes, how information gets flowed from one department to another, kickoff calls, handoff calls. Microsoft Teams is pretty much our biggest line of communication between departments, group chats. And, sometimes other departments have to hold me accountable. Hey, where are we standing with this? And, and I think it's just, if everybody just does their job, as expected, the process itself, makes everything work. It all falls in line.
Yep, all the dominoes fall in place. So yeah, that's it's very important, and same thing on my side too. It's funny you said just following up. My father's in the business too, and he has a very famous term in our office, FUFT. Sometimes people see that written on the board. They're like, "Are you telling me to go? Are you telling me to go fuck myself? Like, what are you telling me here?" And he says, "No, it stands for follow up, follow through." And, it's very important, because in our business, a lot of the companies we work with, including ourselves, we're handling multiple projects at all times. Throughout the day, I'm probably talking to no less than 5 to 6 customers and making sure that each customer's request is handled and handled in time and with the quality that I expect and that they expect. So communication, following up, working with your team, these are all very important, aspects to running a successful business and actually at the end of the day pleasing our customers and making sure that they're happy to want to utilize a company like Lapolis or Green Street Power Partners or whatever it is that they're buying or expecting a service from. Let me ask you, moving forward, I guess into the future, what do you feel the future holds in general for solar power and overall energy efficiency?
So I definitely see a steady incline in where solar is going and how much of solar is going to be replacing our old infrastructure. Battery storage is starting to really come online now. It's starting to take off as solar did when it first had like its, real run at things. Solar was actually used on the first International Space Station. That was one of the,
Wow.
the first
I didn't know
uses
that.
of solar. But it didn't take off, in the aspect that it is today, right? Now there's all kinds of initiatives and there's new legislations coming out that it doesn't require solar, but it's opening the door for a lot more solar to be placed in certain areas that were at one point, restricted. The efficiencies of solar, are, I don't want to say that they're kind of plateauing. I mean, because now they're looking at new cell materials. Silicon right now is the crux of a solar cell, right? That's what a solar cell is mostly made out of, is silicon. They're looking at more efficient materials, materials that are also abundant in the United States as versus overseas. It's definitely, solar is starting to run the course of more for, the domestic United States of being procured, built, manufactured by U.S. companies.
Yeah, that's great too. I mean, aside from the whole, I guess, efficiency standpoint, making sure that they're putting safe material in the solar panel and proper disposal and all these other things, because everything has a lifespan at the end of the day. It's important too that we're bringing jobs into America and not outsourcing as much as we have been across all industries. It's not just solar, of course. But that's great too. Aside from, like I said, the actual development of the physical panel, if we could bring these things and find the natural resources in our own country to do so, that's a fantastic thing.
Oh, it's
'Cause not
huge.
only are we making the solar panel safer to the environment, but now we're also creating jobs for people that may not have had a job yesterday because of a new way of doing this in the industry, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And listen, Brian, I just want to thank you
Yeah. Appreciate it.
for coming on the show. This was a great experience, and I definitely learned a lot today from you. You're definitely an expert in your field, and that's a great thing to see that there are experts like yourself out there behind these projects, because everybody on a day-to-day basis, they just see solar panels. They don't know the actual hard work, blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it. Like it does with my own team. I hear in the office, our team's talking about these projects that they're working on, and it's a lot of work. The late nights, the early mornings, the demands, the different kind of code requirements from the utility company and all the authorities having jurisdiction. And, these aren't, like you said, solar panels aren't just being dropped in the ground and popping up all over the place. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that. And I commend you and your team for, being able to do this work and making it happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
And on that note there, I'd like to thank all the listeners for watching another episode of the Beyond the Blueprint podcast, powered by Lapolis Electric. I'm your host, Stephen Marcelino.